Welcome back to IC. This is the last video on usability testing about quantifying usability. And if you think about usability, it seems like such a vague concept. How do you measure the usability? How can you say that one system is more usable than another? So how can you quantify that? And this is what this video is about. So remember that usability is defined as the extent to which end users can successfully accomplish required goals, and then you have the comfort, effectiveness, and satisfaction criteria. So in other words, quantitatively, usability is a measure of efficiency, effectiveness, and satisfaction. So in other words, you can actually measure efficient and in terms of the time taken to do something. Time, how long did it take to find a particular product, for instance, or to complete a transaction. And effectiveness is not just how long it takes, but whether it can be done at all. And then there's also the satisfaction. So it might take a bit of time, but can you do it in a satisfactory way in terms of number of errors, completion, and also aesthetics? So certain tasks might take a bit longer, but if you enjoy doing it, it might still be okay. Satisfaction is a bit more subjective, is measured on some scale. So efficiency is measured in terms of time, effectiveness in terms of number of errors or completion rates, and satisfaction in terms of some subjective scale. And the first two, efficiency and effectiveness, is of course more objective, and satisfaction is kind of subjective. And certainly they are correlated, right? So if it takes a shorter time to do something with minimal errors, the system doesn't force errors on the user, then it could lead to a higher satisfaction score. So there's a need to think about usability measurement, and really we saw some ways, some methods to do that. You can measure efficiency, effectiveness, and so on. You can quantify it. So you can measure the user's performance, how long they take when they're interacting with the product to do some tasks through the website. For example, if you wanted to post something on Facebook, how many steps do you need to do it? Right? And you can measure the performance in terms of how long it takes, how many seconds it takes for you to do something. Or when you're posting something on Facebook, you could also measure in terms of the number of clicks that you require to do something. So measurement of the user's attitude based on some rating scales and or the user satisfaction, this is a bit more subjective. Mental effort required, again, can be quite subjective. We can also try and measure usability in terms of the complexity of the system itself. So the number of metrics were developed, those 4 different metrics that we have seen on a previous slide, and they can be used in combination. And this is a methodology that was developed in Europe. You can use these measures to compare different products. Like for instance, if you're choosing a tool to do mockups, there are many tools that are used to mock up user interfaces. And for example, Balsamiq, the mockups and other tools. And you can try and do the same task using each of the tools. And for example, to mock up a simple hand-drawn design, one screen or 2 screens, and then see how long it takes for you to put your mockups into the system, for instance. You can carry out what is called comparative usability testing using those metrics. You can measure time required to complete the task, as mentioned, the number of successfully completed tasks, type and frequency, so how often do you have to refer to help, and the general sense of satisfaction based on a questionnaire, for example, that users can do after the evaluation of the task. Now, you can come up with a formula to measure the user's performance metric. So S is the user's performance score in terms of the time spent on the task. So the more time you spend, the lower the performance. Hence, it's the denominator. And then the percentage of tasks completed. The more tasks are completed, the higher the performance score. Hence, that's the numerator. And then you have some constant. So what is this constant? Well, if I tell you that to finish a task, for example, to buy something from Amazon, it takes me 10 minutes. Okay, so what? Right? 10 minutes. Is that fast or slow? Right? So how can you, the absolute value in itself doesn't mean much, but if you compare it to an expert, so for example, someone who developed Amazon took 8 minutes to buy something from the website. Now, that means you're not too bad because 10 minutes not too far from 8 minutes. So in other words, this constant here is actually a measure of the expert's performance. Right? So when you give a number or you have timings like 10 seconds to do something, 20 seconds to do something, it should be measured relative to the time taken by an expert. Right? So if you consider the value of C as a reciprocal of Px over Tx, so this is the time that an expert user takes, then you can express S as a ratio of your performance, POT, against the performance of the expert, PXP, divided by TXP. Right? So your constant is actually a constant that tells you something about the performance of the expert. Right? So in other words, all these measures, right, the timing measures that you take and all that efficiency measures are relative to an expert. So I already mentioned that. So the performance that you achieve is normally compared with an expert's performance, right? There are also other measures. For example, the productive period is the task time. So the total time you take to accomplish the task minus some unproductive time. And this unproductive time may be time spent in getting help, for instance, maybe time spent in trying to search for the feature, search for the button to click, and snack time, right? Time that you need to spend to undo stuff, for instance, or to try and delete stuff because you carried out the wrong action, or perhaps the system crash and then you have to recover, right? So if you measure the productive period, which the total time it takes to accomplish the task, minus the time that you spend consulting help, searching for the right buttons to click, or recovering from errors, the so-called unproductive time, then you get a measure of your productive period. And so this is another measure of usability. And certainly the higher the usability, the higher the productive period. So again, you can use those measures to evaluate your own design, or you can use it to compare a number of different products. And then you can get a usability seal of approval. So here's another method to measure usability, and this is a way to measure usability independently of the user. In other words, we just look at the complexity of the product. So for instance, if you kind of download a piece of software and try to use it and find that it's so complex, it obviously has some usability issues. And there are some references to those measures that we talked about.